Devin Brown has entered the transfer portal and come out at Cal. We need to talk about what that means for Ohio State, what that means for Devin Brown, what that means for Cal. What's up, kinfolk? It's RJ Young. I am not on a step mill. If this is your first time watching the #1 college football show and you have not subscribed, I'm going to ask you to do that and ring the bell if you don't want to miss any of the segments that we upload here, as we are close, like so very close, to 130,000 subscribers to the community, and we have a really cool comment section. I would love for you to join it by answering the question. Do you think Devin Brown should have transferred to Cal, or should he have stayed and tried to compete with Julian Sayin and or Tavian St. Clair for the starting job? I think this is a great move for Devin Brown. I think this is a great move for Ohio State. I think it's a great move for Cal. I think everybody is going to get what they wanted here. Devin Brown wanted to transfer, but also wanted to finish the season on a team that could win the national championship, and did. What I find to be interesting about this is that Aaron Nolan also entered the transfer portal, came out of South Carolina before, we're talking about playing for the national championship. Devin Brown had signaled as much, but there was no mention of where he committed to or hadn't committed to, or even that he was really looking at it while going through this postseason with Ohio State. I think given what Devin Brown has done at Ohio State, meaning he's tried and it hasn't worked out, and he still stuck it out when they had Kyle McCord and they had Will Howard, and it feels like you got to do right by him at one point or another. It's also interesting to note that he probably could compete with Julian Sayin. And I don't know that Julian Sayin would win, only because Devin Brown has been around long enough to have learned not just the offense and or the playbook and how to be a Buckeye, but he's just grown up. And that's the reason I think Will Howard was so attractive to begin with. He had grown up. Like, he's a grad transfer, and he was brought in to do exactly what he did: lead this team to a national championship. And he did that. Year one, needed 1 year, that's all. First grad transfer or transfer quarterback to lead a team to the national championship in his first year since Cam Newton, which is great because I used to call that dude Farm Cam Newton, because his size, like 6'5", 240, that's what he reminded me of. Cam Newton was somehow 6'5", 250. My God, just monster of a man. We're also looking at Julian Sayin, who had transferred to Ohio State shortly after signing with Nick Saban in Alabama. Nick Saban retires. But at the time, Bill O'Brien is the offensive coordinator for the Buckeyes. And I think that had a lot to do with it. Like, Sayin was familiar with the offense, familiar with Bill O'Brien. Bill O'Brien takes the job at Boston College about 20 days into being the offensive coordinator at Ohio State. Feels like Ohio State dodged a bullet, and they also get Chip Kelly landing right in their lap. Devin Brown felt like a Chip Kelly player, or a Chip Kelly quarterback for me from the day one. Like, there's lots of his game that I saw in Dennis Dixon. He's just not as good a passer, and I thought, yet, right? Because that dude's got absolute wheels. He also had shown in high school that he can do the job. Like, people forget, he followed Jackson Dart at Corner Canyon in Draper, Utah, and he passed for 4,800 yards and a ton of touchdowns. And he is great in the open field. So much so that I thought perhaps if Will Howard was not the runner that he is, you might have done what Texas and Arch Manning were doing with Devin Brown at Ohio State. And I think they even tried to do that a little bit with Kyle McCord, just didn't always work. But the idea that you can move on a guy like Kyle McCord and still be okay, and then Kyle McCord can lead the nation in passing and lead Syracuse to a really cool season for Fran Brown's year one, including an upset of Miami and a win in a bowl game in the Holiday Bowl, that says that you know from quarterbacks. So Cal knows that they're getting a guy that has been under the Ryan Day umbrella for the past 3 years and who is ready to take the leap. They also get a guy that can act like a bridge quarterback or 2-year starter as their 5-star signee. Kind of sits there and waits. As you know, I don't know that he's going to be happy about that, but I'm also looking around and somebody's got to go to Wake Forest, because I don't know that they're going to start the season with Robbie Ashford. There's all of that's going to be into play. I think Justin Wilcox getting a quarterback that he knows is a playmaker and can help them is going to go a long way for that Cal program. I thought they really did a good job in their first year in the ACC, and I thought landing on Fernando Mendoza was a big part of that. That's a guy that led them to back-to-back bowl game appearances, threw for over 3,000 yards this year, transferred to Indiana to try to do what Curtis Work did, +1. And that's what we're looking at. Can Fernando Mendoza take Indiana one step farther than Curtis Work at Indiana? which is interesting because Indiana's only losses this season were to the two teams that played for the national championship. What a wild and cool year for them. Meanwhile, I'm looking over at Ohio State, and I'm going, oh, you've all of a sudden got room for another quarterback if one should make himself available, which is going to be interesting. Will one make itself available? Maybe. I don't know. Will one come from the FCS that you can perhaps throw into the mix? Maybe. But more than that, it's just another scholarship you got to play with. And not for nothing, Julian Sayin is going to be, or Tavian St. Clair, the youngest quarterback that Ohio State has had as starter since C.J. Stroud. Now, he's got Jeremiah Smith. He's got Carnell Tate. He's got Brandon Ennis. He's got James Peoples. That offensive line is going to get, worked over, and that's okay because it got worked over this year. And that defense is going to see a whole bunch of guys enter the draft, right? But it's Ohio State, and they have been recruiting and signing like you would expect Ohio State to recruit and sign. It's why I made them the number one team in my way too early top 25. I think Julian Sayin is good enough to do the job, and if he's not, I think Tavian St. Clair is. Lincoln Kienholz, I don't see it. That's what you're losing by letting Devin Brown go to Cal, or I should say, not trying to keep him at Ohio State. You're losing perhaps what might have been a really good guy to have in your back pocket if it's not going well. But two ways of looking at this. Either you can let the younger player take his lumps and learn from it and go into next season or go get somebody else, or you're not fully committed to him. In either case, it's getting tough. It's getting tough now because you can have a 5-star ready to go, and you might be ready to move on your veteran quarterback because you see the talent behind him and go, we got to bet on this. But you could also end up with a crappy 5-star quarterback that you didn't know about till he puts himself on the football field, or a guy that just wasn't ready. So in those cases, Jackson Arnold, both crappy and not ready. Dante Moore, not ready. He's going to be the guy at Oregon. I think that having to play him the way that they did at UCLA is not necessarily good for his development, but who knows? Like Trevor Lawrence led Clemson to a national championship after being inserted 3 games into the season. It happens. That's what goes on sometimes. You have to take that gamble. You have to make that bet. And then you have to trust the structure that you put around him, not just the offense, but the environment. And I think between Ryan Day and Chip Kelly, they can handle it. It's going to be okay. I am interested, though, to find out what the veteran presence might look like at Ohio State, because I think that you always need a veteran presence. And maybe that's Lincoln Kienholz, right? Maybe that's what you're banking on here. As far as Cal is concerned, you fixed it, right? You lost a great player. You added what I think can be a great player. As far as Ohio State is concerned, you did what you needed to do. You've told basically Julian you're going to be the guy going in the spring, and then we'll see. And you've also left yourself just a little bit of room in case there's somebody who comes available and you want to add them. I think, if nothing else, what I've learned is I want the portal window to move. And I think the AFCA is said to the NCAA, move this thing. Because having players that have to say, I have to enter the portal now, either because the place where I want to go only has a spot for so long, or because my coaches won't let me stay on the roster, that sucks. It really does. Like Bo Pribola was an example of this. He didn't want to enter the portal. He didn't want to leave. Ends up in Missouri. It's going to be cool for him, I think. But the idea that you got to give up on your team in the middle of the postseason doesn't feel good for anybody. Like, players don't like it, coaches don't like it, fans don't like it. Moving that window is going to help. I don't think that Devin Brown should have needed to say, I plan to enter the transfer portal and or put his name in there. I think that everybody should be allowed to stay clean on this until the end of the last game is played. I don't think that we should be playing enter the portal before the national championship is decided. So if the national championship isn't decided until January 20th, don't open the portal until January 21st. I don't see how that is going to impact how we talk about football, but it can impact how we talk about school, which they still go to and they're still a part of. They got to be in class. And because the semester begins when the semester begins, you're not always going to get grace from the university because, well, the transfer portal doesn't allow for you to transfer before this date. And that's part of it, right? You got to be enrolled. They got to have you in classes, all those sorts of things. And having being enrolled at 2 different places at the same time is just not going to work. There's a lot to unpack here. But bottom line, I like this move for Devin Brown. I like this move for Ohio State. And I like this move for Cal. If you don't, I'd love to hear why.